Hi, I'm Janice. Let's discuss filling out a properly completed TD1 form, both federal and provincial. To keep the videos short and to the point, I'll go through the explanations fairly quickly. Please pause and rewind as you like. Just a reminder to check the other videos in the library. Here we go. When you start with a company where you get a regular paycheck, and it doesn't matter how long you will work for this employer, by law you must complete TD1 forms as they are the backbone of having income tax deducted from every pay. Before we get into the forms, you must realize having properly completed TD1 forms is not the responsibility of your employer, but rather it's you as the taxpayer to manage the income tax being deducted at source being your weekly or bi-weekly payroll. If the forms are not completed correctly, you may be over-contributing to income tax or even underpaying, which is worse. If you overpay, you will get the difference back when you file your annual personal tax return. However, if you underpay, this will come back to haunt you at tax season and can cause a lot of headaches for you, your family, and you may even want to blame your employer. But remember, the responsibility stops at the employee level. Yes, your employer must get you to complete these forms, but it's your job to fill them out correctly, get them submitted to the payroll department, and keep on top of them should your personal situation change. Let's discuss more of this process to see if we can shed some light on the forms for you. TD1s are completed by the employee like I mentioned. It tells the employer what income tax level you are at to ensure that sufficient income tax is deducted from your pay. There are two TD1 forms to be concerned about. There is the federal form, which is completed by all Canadians, and a provincial form that is specific to your province. In this example, we will discuss the New Brunswick TD1 provincial form, but the same rules apply for all provinces in Canada. They are province-specific. I could go on with long explanations as to what each line means, but 9 times out of 10, it's the same explanations for most clients, and even if some of the line apply to you, our firm would suggest not worrying about anything much more than what we discuss here. So please avoid reading too much into the forms, just follow along and you will be that much more aware of how they impact you. These forms are often overlooked or misunderstood. There are always federal and provincial forms to be filled out because we, as Canadians, pay a federal and a provincial tax through our payroll as a deduction. The credits vary province to province, and so do the basic exemptions. A basic exemption is the amount you are allowed to make income tax-free in a year. By this time, you should know that when you start a new job, you must complete new TD1 forms. This is easily the most common time, but did you know that there are other reasons? Let's discuss. You should also revise your TD1 forms whenever your financial situation changes. This could be looking after an infirm parent or child, you have a disability registered with CRA, or maybe you started a second job. There are a lot of reasons to complete the forms. Please review the TD1s, both federal and provincial, to see which lines apply to you. Whatever you do, don't force a line on a TD1 to fit your wants versus reality, meaning if a credit kind of applies to you but not really, then don't claim it because the truth will come out on your personal tax return. Not to worry, like we mentioned earlier, don't get lost in all the possible credits. We'll mention a quick and simple method of completing the forms. There are 2 very common reasons for updating your TD1s, but are often overlooked, so I'll clarify these for you. If you work more than one job at the same time, not going from job to job and only really have one job at a time, but rather you have a primary job where you make most of your money, but you may also have a night or weekend job on the side to bring in a few bucks. For your primary job, be sure to complete the TD1 forms correctly, not considering any other factors. The trick comes in with the second job, and this is where people get it wrong. When you take on the second job, at the very beginning, complete a new set of TD1s, but don't consider your basic exemptions on line 1 of each form. Instead, enter 0 on the bottom of the first page. The reason for this is that you are entitled to only one basic exemption as a Canadian. If you complete the secondary job's TD1 forms the same way you do your primary job, you will be extremely underdeducted in income tax, and you will be in for a rude awakening when you file your tax return because you'll have a feeling of wondering if taking on a second job was even worth it. If you owe income tax when you file your annual tax return, the problem isn't with the second job, it's you. Remember what I said before, The responsibility lies with the employee, the taxpayer, to ensure that they manage their financial situation appropriately. Well, completing TD1 forms is part of that. Don't underestimate how impactful they can be. I mentioned there is another popular reason for amending your TD1s, and that's to have additional income tax deducted off your pay. But I'll review that in more detail coming up. Now that we know a lot of the backstory and what the forms mean, let's review how to complete them. This will be easy because we'll go over them and complete them based on our recommendations. Everyone has their own suggestions, but our method tends to lead to less issues. I will show one version of the TD1 forms. The year doesn't matter based on these examples. The forms don't change much each year except for the values. Here is a TD1 Federal. It's only page 1 as both TD1s are 2-page documents. You can tell it's the federal form because of the Canadian flag and the Canada Revenue Agency stamp at the top left corner. When completing the form, just fill out the top section, your name, address, date of birth, social insurance number. If this is your primary job, as mentioned earlier, take the amount from line 1 and carry it down to the bottom of the page to line 13, bypassing all the listed credits. If you claim any of the credits listed on any line except line 1, you are saying you are entitled to those amounts. This means you will take more money home in your pay. But again, don't force feed the credits to yourself. Again, reality will show on your tax return if you really are entitled, and you may have to pay some or a lot back to the CRA. A notable point here is, if this is your second job, you would enter 0 on line 13, not the provincial amount. Now let's flip the page over to page 2. If you wish to have additional income tax deducted from your pay, maybe to accommodate for other income you receive that perhaps there is insufficient tax deducted, or maybe you want to save up for a tidy income tax refund for whatever reason. If this is the case, enter a dollar value in the area highlighted in red. This indicates the amount that will be deducted from your pay, and it will stay this way until you change it or you leave the job. If you choose this method, be sure that your paychecks reflect your request, as some payroll departments overlook this field and don't realize the employee had requested to pay extra tax. Now we move on to the provincial TD1, page 1. Basically, the flow is the same provincially as it is federally. Again, you can tell you are completing the provincial form based on the logo of the province in the top left corner. Complete the upper section as you did on the federal form. Take the amount from line 1, which is pre-filled in, and move it down to the bottom of the form to line 12, bypassing all the other credits for the same reason as mentioned previously. If this is a second job that you have at the same time as having your primary job, enter 0 here, not the basic exemption amount. In short, you would enter 0 on the bottom of page 1 for both federal and provincial forms if you are completing them, because it's your second job while still employed at your primary employment. Let's flip the page over to page 2. Just sign and date the bottom. Yep, it's that easy. When the forms are complete, give them to your payroll department, but never assume they will process them as per your wishes. Make sure the changes are reflected on your next pay. Again, updating and monitoring your financial status is your responsibility, not your employer's. There you have it. There is a lot more you could know about TD1 forms, but to keep things simple and easy to follow, the methods we discussed in this video are our recommendations for most people. Have you checked out the other payroll-related videos or any of the other topics in our library? There is no better time than the present. I'm Janice, at your service, and thanks for watching.